Hey everyone, just bear with me for a moment. We're going to get started in just a minute. So thank you for your patience. This is the pandemic. We're on lockdown, so we're sharing space with our significant others. I'm going to try to give this report while another person in the room is still working. Thank you all for following my reporting this week. So just hang tight and give me a minute here while I get organized here. All right. So we wrapped up the third week of testimony in Julian Assange's extradition trial, and the defense had a very significant witness on the stand today. His name is Patrick Eller. He is a computer forensics expert. He was actually entered into the court as an expert witness, so he wasn't just talking about facts in the case. He was put forward to give testimony about this expert evidence, and he spoke very authoritatively. He's someone who has experience looking over the court-martial record in Chelsea Manning's court-martial, and he looked at it closely, and his background is extremely relevant to this case. He is not only the CEO of a company that is involved in contracting work for digital investigations and forensic examination, but he's also someone who has 20 years of experience in the U.S. Army, and he held positions as a criminal investigator and supervisor of investigations relating to digital evidence in particular. And from 2012 to 2019, he was the command digital forensic examiner and was responsible for all administrative inspection and oversight functions within the digital forensic program that included over 80 digital forensic examiners at the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command headquarters in Quantico, Virginia. Excuse me. And of course, Quantico is something we know from the story of Chelsea Manning, the Quantico Marine base there where they had a brig. It's been shut down since, but this was where Chelsea Manning was held and was allegedly, was actually inhumanely treated, was subject to treatment that was described as torture. And so, and he was working with investigators that probably come from the same background, professional understanding that the experts come from, which the U.S. military used to bring forward and testify in the court-martial against Chelsea Manning. So this is an expert witness who was definitely qualified to be giving all of the information that we heard today in this court proceeding. And basically what Patrick Eller had to state was importantly that there isn't a lot of basis to this argument that was put forward, to this charge that was put forward against against Julian Assange related to the agreement between Manning and Assange around the password hash. And so if I could just take a moment to get into, I'll go back over some of the highlights that came out from this testimony and what was basically addressed in these court proceedings. Just pulling it up here right now. Okay, so, the defense had him on to show that there wasn't much basis for this charge. And it's very technical. It was highly technical. We were getting into aspects of encryption and whether hacking could violate this or break into this. So Eller outlined what the allegations were, and I think it was really plain the way he described it. And I understood a lot of this because I was a reporter who covered the Chelsea Manning trial extensively. And so Eller said that when he was hired by the defense, he was told to consider whether Assange had assisted Manning in cracking a password stored on the U.S. Department of Defense computers connected to the classified secret Internet Protocol Router Network. That would be the information network. This would be what had a lot of the databases where she could access information. It was then, would cracking the password allow Manning to, quote, log on to computers under a username that did not belong to her, and that such measure would have made it more difficult for investigators to determine the source of disclosures. In other words, would she have done this to try and get anonymity in order to search around the government networks? And then, as he understood it, specifically, what Manning provided this partial hash value asking if Assange knew how to assist in cracking it, was this an agreement, part of some agreement in the alleged conspiracy? This piece of information, was it enough even to carry out the cracking of a password? And it essentially, first off, the important thing that, and this was established when the Mark Summers, who's the defense attorney, came back and asked questions. It was, so this account that's associated with Assange in the prosecution's case is Nathaniel Frank. We can go back to Chelsea Manning's case to note that Nathaniel Frank, that account, they've never definitively been able to place Julian Assange as the person who was at a computer working through that account. It's always been the position in these cases, as well as in Chelsea Manning's case, even though they didn't have to protect Julian Assange's interests, it's always been that the government can't prove who was using that account, and it could have been anybody who might have been using this Jabber Chat account to talk with Chelsea Manning. We don't know if others in WikiLeaks used this to talk with sources. We don't know if it was always Julian Assange that used this account. And so that was established very clearly in the later part of the testimony that Eller gave. He assumed it was Assange because the information he was given to him from the government was the same that he had. But you can't really place Assange in this chat. So is it them making an agreement? I mean, maybe more than anything, that might be one of the biggest things that the government has not proved, is that this is Assange who's talking to Chelsea Manning in this conversation. This isn't like the chat with Adrian Lamo and Chelsea Manning. We were able to prove that that was Adrian Lamo who was ratting her out to the U.S. government, to the FBI. We don't know if Julian Assange was truly having conversations with Manning, and I don't think Julian Assange has ever confirmed that he had conversations with Chelsea Manning. So, but it's, on the other side of the coin, Chelsea believes she was talking to Julian Assange, and that was kind of the sense that she got, that she was talking to somebody important in the WikiLeaks organization. But I don't know that she, there is, bottom line, no definitive proof. So Eller then spoke about how the downloading of materials is tracked by documenting IP addresses. We're getting into very technical details here. And I think one of the more crucial exchanges came, after the defense laid out some of its basic details. I also should include here that we go back to the trial of Chelsea Manning because we hear once again about how there were soldiers that were downloading music, movies, and programs to their computer when they didn't have authorization to download those. There were people who were being recruited to go over the top and make sure that there were people who were being asked to come help them put these programs and files on their computer so that they could get around the fact that they were prohibited from having these downloads. And so The fact is that her computer machine was wiped days before there was any discussion about this, and the idea that is put forward by the defense that is more plausible than the government's conspiracy theory is that Chelsea was maybe just asking Julian Assange, as someone who's a known hacker, if there was any way to crack into the computer so that she could download movies, music, or programs without being detected, because all of what she had on her machine in Baghdad at this intelligence facility was no longer there. And how could she get it back on without maybe being seen as violating the rules? So Eller actually takes this thread and runs with it, and then also shows that she had access to these databases, and there wasn't really much reason for her to cloak herself in anonymity when getting into them, because it's not like she didn't have the security clearance to be in these databases. So then we get this critical exchange, and I think this really blows apart or directly undermines any of the thin basis that the prosecution had for bringing this computer crime charge against Julian Assange. I mean, it just exposes it as one of the most farcical elements of this case against Julian Assange. The fact that they are even putting this forward and asking us to take it seriously. And so Eller, he's asked by Lewis if he agreed that Manning and Assange, quote, thought they could crack the password and agreed to attempt to crack. And he said, quote, the hash was provided, and they said they had rainbow tables for it, and never stated where that hash was from. And then he said the government's own expert witness in the court-martial stated that that was not enough for them to actually be able to do it. In other words, for the people out there, and that includes me, who don't really know what the computer speak is, that some of this jargon, it's hard to follow. We don't have experience working with encryption and some of this technology closely. What's the takeaway? What's the more generic takeaway? The generic takeaway is that in that conversation, in that chat log, what happens there is that Chelsea Manning never provides enough information for Assange to ever carry out the cracking of passwords, ever provide the assistance that they are claiming there was an agreement for Assange to provide. And yes, he's interested. Yes, he would like to do this. But just because he wants to, the agreement has to also come from Chelsea Manning. And Chelsea Manning never gives Assange all of the information so that he could do this if in fact that is Assange on the other end of the chat. So we know that this was a really important statement that was made by Eller, because like someone who knows that they've been beat in an argument, he resorted to this very kind of juvenile response of, well, are you aware that Assange has publicly boasted he is a fantastic hacker? Clearly he's not even engaging with the evidence that is just put to him that shows what he said is bunk. It's total nonsense. And so he moved on to his other line of questioning. He presented his, they put a lot of work into this, but it didn't really amount to much. They tried to change Eller's opinion about whether it was feasible to go after this encryption because there had been some kind of security defect earlier on. But Microsoft patched it in 1999. So Eller didn't buy it at all. And again, I'll outline the timeline. This is pretty significant here because to me, this kind of shows that the whole genesis of how we understood this case is based on lies. He said that the government is going against their own forensic expert. So he lays out that the timeline of events suggests that this jabber chat that probably maybe it took place between Manning and Assange occurred after she'd already downloaded these cables and the Gitmo files, the Iraq war logs, and the Afghanistan war logs. That downloading these war logs were routine. It's a routine during her work. She didn't need to hide that she was doing it. She needed offline backups for her work, and also the only set of documents named in the indictment that Manning sent after the alleged password cracking attempt were State Department cables, which she had authorized access to. And he went on to say her usual account on the SIPRNet computers, she probably was using that. There was no reason to not ordinarily access it. There's no reason to hide her conduct. Prior to any technical analysis, he goes on to say the indictment's assertion that Manning hoped to gain anonymity or was trying to access information that she did not already have authorization to access is a weak one, as she already had authorized access, which she used to download the above data sets. It is unclear to me that any anonymity would have been gained by cracking the password hash to gain access to the FTP user account. So it's very technical, but there's an account on the computer that is local to it, has administrative privileges. It's a way for someone to get around some of the restrictions that might be in place for user accounts. And the idea is that she could have tried to use this account to I think hack into this to take advantage of the administrative privileges, but there's just really no evidence for any of what this theory is that the prosecutors have been putting forward. It does not exist. So let me get to let's see. Let me check in with you all here, and let me look at some of your questions, and then also let me provide a bit of a wrap on this third week. And also, let me take a moment to get to something that came up at the beginning of this trial. So at the beginning of the day today, on this 14th day, as we were concluding, the defense won in their effort to convince the judge to move to be flexible and allow for time. They were granted 4 weeks to put together their closing arguments after the last witness on October 2nd. They will have plenty, I don't know, plenty is the word, but they will have a good amount of time to piece together their closing argument. Much more time than what initially it looked like the judge was going to push for. It looked like she was going to say, let's have it in the 5th week. You'll only have a matter of days to put together your closing argument. And it came up during the proceedings that she asked, do you think the election will have any impact on this case, the outcome of the election? Do you think it will matter? And it's been suggested that this points to the idea that this is a political case, that it confirms that she understands this is a political case. This idea that it could change with it, if Joe Biden is elected, that maybe she's beginning to recognize that Donald Trump is the one, his administration has been playing quite an instrumental role in pushing this aggressive case against Julian Assange. I'll just say that I think that she might be genuinely unaware of how U.S. politics works, and the way that there's a continuity of government. And even the defense doesn't really buy that, the election outcome makes much difference to the case that they are making in defense of Julian Assange. They say that what you really need to focus on is the fact that the Trump administration made this choice to indict Julian Assange, focus on the genesis, how it all began. And that's not going to have all of that evidence. It doesn't matter who wins in November, whether Joe Biden manages to beat Donald Trump or Donald Trump survives and lives to govern a second term. It's not going to have much of a bearing on this evidence that we've already heard. It's not going to require another hearing to address Donald Trump's reelection. And also, as the defense pointed out, Edward Fitzgerald said, his election isn't going to alter what goes on in U.S. prisons. We're not going to suddenly find that people in U.S. prisons are treated much, much better than they are because Donald Trump isn't the president anymore. That's just not going to happen. So, I saw Kristen Harafson had a quote about this that spoke to the political nature of this case. I understand his comment. I think it's a good one. I would just qualify what happened from the judge as something that wasn't about trying to get this through before Donald Trump is up before Election Day. I don't think she's trying to speed this through. In fact, it's not possible for her to speed a decision on this extradition through before November 4th, because she even said, whether we have this hearing in the next in the 5th week, if we only give you a few days, even if we were done by mid-October with this, it's impossible. She's not going to have a decision before Election Day. And now with the timeline that we have, the defense was put on notice that it's not going to be until 2021 in January that Julian Assange finds out if this extradition request was authorized and approved by the judge. So let me get to some of your questions. And again, it's been a pretty rough week for the defense, sitting through all of this mental health and physical health testimony from witnesses, hearing from prosecution experts, prosecution doctors who have been put on the stand to undermine their diagnoses, some of the other diagnoses by the doctors that have been more friendly to the defense. People who diagnosed him with one doctor diagnosed him with Asperger's, and then you have a prosecution doctor who says, well, that's not true. You've got a doctor for the defense that says he's got severe depression, and I diagnosed him with severe depression. Then you got a medical doctor for the prosecution that says, oh no, he probably never really had severe depression. I would diagnose moderate depression. Perhaps it got pretty bad in November and December of 2019, but I just wouldn't put him in that category of having depression that was that severe. So they've had to put up with this all week, and they've had to air out all kinds of personal details about Julian Assange's medical background that Julian probably wanted to keep private, things that we were never intended to know, but he's got to put this on the record to try and save him from extradition. Let me get to your questions. So, what do I make of the judge's decision to give the defense 4 more weeks? And do you think there's a possibility that Julian will be released on bail while waiting for the judge's ruling? I don't think that he'll be granted bail. And rhetorically, she's just been kind of invoking him like she cares, but it's very cynical. She does not truly care about Julian Assange's well-being. Otherwise, he would be on home confinement a long time ago. He would have been released during COVID-19. If she actually cared about his well-being, he would have been released when they made it clear that he was a vulnerable person who could be threatened by the virus that was spreading within prisons. And that didn't happen. So I will go on to the next question that I have from all of you. And thank you again for all of your support. I see somebody mentioning that their account was suspended on Twitter, an Assange supporter from Australia, and no reason was given. Others have also been suspended. I will just generally throw out that we've seen this with very political activists and people who are supporters of causes that involve supporting Palestinians, Venezuelans, people around the world who engage in the support of political causes that are at odds with the United States empire, have found that they have been censored. And I obviously can't speak to specifically what Assange supporters might have been going through. I don't know if there was a purge by Twitter, but we've seen here and there that they look at activity and it ends up either their algorithms are triggered or something is triggered in the system and they censor people, or they do think that there's something suspicious about the political activism of an account and those people are unfairly removed. And that goes to the sort of censorship authorities that these Silicon Valley companies have been appointing themselves with, engaging in. And we ought to be more, we ought to be doing more objecting to this. Shout out to the Action for Assange people who do the live stream. During these lunch breaks, I've been joining their live streams to give, I guess, a preliminary rundown of what's going on. I talk about the mornings every time I join them in lunch and have a good time with them. They have done tremendous work as activists trying to keep Julian Assange's name in the limelight during these extradition trial proceedings. They get up very early. They're in the States. They're not in the UK. So if you get a chance to see anything that they do in talking about this case, they're good people. They've been very friendly and supportive of my work. Greg asks, can Chelsea testify? Would she be willing? Would her testimony help? No, I think Chelsea doesn't want to testify. Actually, it's to the benefit of the Assange legal team that she doesn't testify. Their case is good as it stands in rebutting, especially when it comes to that computer crime charge. It's pretty rock solid that the government has no proof that Julian Assange committed a computer crime. Now, I don't know. It's up to legal interpretation whether there's enough there for a conspiracy. And I've seen some very weak cases involving alleged conspiracies brought as political prosecution. So maybe the U.S. government might survive that in a U.S. court. I don't know if the judge is going to buy it. It's very thin, but she probably is unwilling. Her testimony would likely not help. And she needs to go down in history as engaging in a tremendously courageous act that protected Julian Assange by the fact that she did not become a star witness for the prosecution in this case, that she did not comply with the grand jury subpoena and won through her resistance for a year. And she even attempted suicide. The psychological toll that this took on her was tremendous, and she still continued to fight the government and refused to comply. And that it'd be hard for Julian Assange to ever repay her. It'd be really difficult. It's hard to quantify that kind of sacrifice that she made from March of 2019 through March 2020. Lots of gratitude for the reporting. Richard says he's reporting the judge admits. Richard Medhurst says the judge admits Assange trial is political. Like I said, that's one interpretation. And I'm going to have an opportunity to have a conversation with Richard on my podcast, the Unauthorized Disclosure Show, a week from now. I'm looking forward to doing that episode and recording it with my co-host, Ryan Ukalik. So I haven't had a chance to talk with him about his reporting. And I think we'll get into this, what's the judge's attitude and how she's been dealing with this case. All right. Well, it's been a long week, and there has been a lot that has unfolded, and there is much that's going to come next week in this fourth week where we have witnesses that are still expected to testify. I don't have the witness list handy, but we have more people who are going to testify about the publishing of materials, a journalist like Andy Worthington, who is still to testify about the Guantanamo files and that work with WikiLeaks. Let's just do one more question here. What's the likelihood that today's testimony by Eller helps sway the judge towards not extraditing Assange? So this veers into speculation, and I don't know that I have great predictive powers, but my view is that this is highly valuable testimony for the Assange legal team. I would put it as possibly the best evidence that they have so far and against a single charge. Unfortunately, this testimony only goes towards one of the 18 charges, but there are 17 other charges. And also understand that, our basis of dealing with the indictment as far as the public goes began with this charge. The first time that we heard that the U.S. government was going to prosecute Julian Assange came as he was being thrown out of the embassy, and then we saw the indictment. And the indictment was not on any any violations of the Espionage Act, any alleged violations there. It was just on this, what we now know very clearly is a baseless conspiracy to commit a computer crime charge that they don't, it defies any technical expertise for them to make this argument. They're asking us to be willfully stupid in order to accept that there is anything legitimate about this computer crime charge. You have to make yourself an idiot to believe that this computer crime charge has any basis in the reality of what went on between Chelsea Manning and whoever was on the end of that chat with her. So I think because Patrick Eller referenced the court-martial records, he's referencing the government's own forensic experts, and he's showing quite clearly and meticulously that this wasn't even a part of the case against Chelsea Manning, that when it was put on the record, these kinds of conclusions were not drawn by forensic examiners that worked for the military prosecutors. I think when he does that, that's pretty persuasive, that the judge would have to notice that it's fairly thin. So I don't know, when we get into extradition, can we throw out charges? Can we say, could she say, I authorize extradition, but not on these charges? I don't know. But as it looks to me, I feel like this computer crime charge is totally without any basis whatsoever. And you could even say that a defense attorney in the U.S. would go to court and argue to a judge that it's a failure to state an offense, because, as it's laid out, it's like a deliberate misrepresentation of the facts that we have. Getting to the end, I see all of your gratitude and everything, all of your thanks. Are there witnesses that will be giving evidence on the UC Global spying? That I know, we still have a couple witnesses to testify. I don't believe they would leave this out. This is important testimony to get on the record. All right, I'm going to go work on a report on what Eller did today, which I have said multiple times now is a tremendous contribution to the defense's efforts to save Julian from extradition. I'll be outlining that in my coverage. And then this afternoon, at some point, I will have an interview with Daniel Ellsberg posted that I was able to do with him. I found some time. I don't know how I managed to do that between doing live updating on court proceedings and doing these video reports and talking to other media outlets about my coverage, and then also putting together the writing articles that I've been sending out with my Substack newsletter. But I talked to Daniel Ellsberg for about an hour, and I am excited to be able to share it with you because it was a fantastic to go back and forth with him about what we've been seeing in this extradition trial, to hear his wisdom and for him to share his experiences again and recall. Always good to hear from Dan Ellsberg and hear him recall what it was like for him when he was put on trial by the U.S. government. And that's now 50 years ago, about 50 years ago that happened. So a long time. And this is where we find ourselves now. This is where we find ourselves, that the government is still pushing onward with this case. As I say at the end of all of my video reports, if you go to dissenter.substack.com/subscribe, you can get the written reports every day in the fourth week. So we have 5 more days. I'll have 5 more written reports for you on each of the days proceedings. And then there will be video reports like this after each day of court. I'll have the live updates at Kevin Gosztola, my handle, which is in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And my colleague, Brian Sonestein, will be back to join me, and I'm going to let him know that we've incorporated a question and answer at the end. So if he's joining me for these broadcasts, we can include you all and continue to benefit from your engagement in this. I have to say I'm honored and privileged to have the kind of support for the independent journalism that I am doing, that you're all able to give. This year, as everyone knows, could not be more rough. It's tested everybody, and the global pandemic has changed the nature of how we're all working, and it's put incredible economic distress, particularly on people. I can speak only about the United States, but I'm sure other countries have seen people pushed to the brink of poverty and deeper into despair. And any one of you who finds, $1, $2, or $3 to throw my way every other week or on any given day, you're amazing to me. And I thank you for believing in this work that we're doing, helping us to challenge the establishment media blackout, making me a voice among a group of other voices that are out there doing independent work. And so I hope all of you have find some time to enjoy yourselves, find some warmth over the weekend, take a break from this mentally exhausting and physically exhausting case, take a break from the anxiety and stress that this causes of believing that the U.S. government, of knowing that the U.S. government is cold and heartless in going after a journalist and going to great lengths to bring him to the United States to put him on trial in a case that could very well be the end of his life. That is hugely disturbing and profoundly distressing. But take this Saturday and this Sunday to have a little break. I'll recharge myself, and I'll be back here on Monday for the 4th week of Julian Assange's extradition trial. Until then, thank you.